Hi chickens, this is the second video that I'm putting out today in honour of World Goddess Day. I'm just going to give you a few kind of thoughts and opinions now on the concepts of finding a matron and patron deity, and also bonding with your matron and patron, or potentially with any gods that you kind of want to get to know and get closer to and kind of form a relationship with of one kind or another. There is a point of view that exists with regard to working with personified deity. And I wouldn't say that that point of view is necessarily wrong, but I would say that it can be sometimes a little unhelpful. So I kind of want to address that first. There's a point of view that kind of extends the belief that you need to wait for a sign or a symbol or a message from a god or goddess that's going to come into your life and kind of announce to you in one way or another that they want to be your matron or patron and they want to have this special relationship with you. And I suppose, you know, there are a great many stories, amazing stories, that kind of contain epiphany and realisation and are very kind of exciting, that serve to explain how certain people have come to an understanding of who their matron or patron is. And those stories might involve having a really prophetic dream of some kind, where a specific god or goddess kind of made themselves known and said, hey, you know, we're going to work together, or said something really significant and meaningful. And other people, you know, might tell a story like, for example, I was walking through an art gallery and I saw a picture of Athena, a painting of Athena, and the painting just lit up and I felt this instant like mad recognition, and suddenly I knew that Athena was going to be the goddess for me, that kind of story. And these stories are so beautiful and I really enjoy them, I really get a kick out of them, but I think they can also be quite intimidating, and they can make people feel as though they need to be waiting for this sign or this symbol, and that until that time they're kind of going to be bereft of a matron and patron, even if they really, really want one. And I would say my advice to you would be, if you are kind of wondering why you don't have one of these signs yet, or why you haven't experienced one of these dreams yet, and why it's kind of not really going that way for you, I would suggest you don't need to wait for that intense time, for that moment that's kind of going to blindside you out of nowhere and make you realise that, you know, your matron or patron are who they are, and, you know, you hadn't realised it before and suddenly it's come upon you. I didn't find my matron that way at all. I didn't wait for a sign. I got out there and started having some conversations. I started kind of feeling around the energies of different goddesses and trying to work out what kind of goddess would work for me. And I consciously knew that I wanted to invite personified deity, and the first decision that I came to was that I really wanted that deity to be a death goddess. I felt that a death goddess kind of explained the most about my consciousness, the things that concern me, my attitude towards things, and also the things that I was going through in my life at that time. Release, surrender, acceptance, flow, that kind of stuff. And going into the darkness, going into the unconscious and really kind of psyche diving, that kind of thing. So for me, I knew that I wanted a death goddess, and my particular death goddess did not come to me in a dream. She did not kind of send me any prophetic signs or symbols or anything of that nature. I simply just started researching death goddesses. And what I did was, each time I researched death goddesses and researched certain stories to do with death in accordance with mythology and the divine feminine and things like that, I would make sure that I meditated first before I actually got into the research. And I would make sure that I kind of used some third eye opening techniques with chakra meditation, because I really wanted to be connected to even the tiniest little suggestion that my higher mind was saying, this is the one, kind of thing. And that's how it worked for me. I did loads of diligent study on various goddesses, death goddesses from different traditions, and I came across Hel, and something kind of clicked. I just kind of read about her and saw a few visual depictions of her, and I felt like I was home. I felt like there was something to it, as though I'd kind of come across her before in some way. But it certainly wasn't kind of like stars exploded from the sky and I had this massive transpersonal experience and I felt like I had wings and I flew up into the sky. Like, none of that stuff happened. It was just kind of me ambling along, doing some research to try and understand where personified female deity might fit into my practice, because it was something that I really wanted to invite. And Hel came along, and that was cool. And I have a really close relationship to my matron now, and I regularly feel that sense of transpersonal communication, in the sense that I see certain things, certain signs, and certain things happening in my life where I kind of feel like I feel her presence. I feel the presence of her very unique and very individual energy, and I feel I've bonded with that energy on a really primal level. And so all of that good magical stuff that comes out of people's relationships with their matrons and patrons that they may have found in a really kind of magical and spiritual way, I have all of that stuff now, and I just found her on Wikipedia. I mean, you know, there's still the same scope for bonding, there's still the same scope for connection if you went out there and looked for your matron or patron. There's no kind of rule that states that they need to come to you and give you this really big overarching message in order to have a meaningful bond with them. You know, the bond is really about the work, it's about the daily going into it, it's about the communing, it's about the meditating, it's about going deeper, it's about kind of going to the realm of your god or goddess on the astral and kind of seeing how that feels. You know, none of this stuff can be skipped. Just because a god or goddess comes into your life in perhaps a quite fanciful way, in a very sort of magical way, the kind of way that maybe you'd kind of make a film about, or, you know, a really impressive way, doesn't mean that your bond is going to be instant, doesn't mean that there's not going to be lots of work involved, and it doesn't mean that you don't have to put the time in to get to know who they are and to get to know how they work with you and how you can work with their energies. So really, the manner of meeting doesn't really have that much to do with the manner of the connection over time. And so I just wanted to put that out to you, that, you know, I found my goddess in a very bog standard way. In fact, I think most people that saw my last Witchy Hall video would argue that the way that I found Carly was way more exciting and way more kind of like that typical story that you often hear, whereas my story of meeting Hell is, you know, totally standard. I was looking around for death goddesses, I found her, and I thought, yeah, I think I'm going to start exploring her a little bit more. And it went along like that. So I just wanted to say, don't wait for a sign. Go in search if that's what you want to do, and really go in search and think about which concepts and themes and energies you want to connect with the divine feminine or divine masculine, and why. And I would recommend doing some journaling about this too. I really sort of had to explore why I wanted a death goddess. Now, for me, on the surface, it seemed like a seriously organic decision. For a whole host of reasons. I mean, I'm fascinated by thanatology, which is the study of the social and political aspects of death, you know, anthropological aspects of death, that kind of thing. So I'm already pretty into studying death, and I've had my own journey with the acceptance of one day, kind of the ego self dying. And I'm fascinated by kind of like darker concepts, and one might even accuse me of being morbid or maudlin, I suppose, in some sense. I'm drawn towards that kind of stuff, and I'm not afraid of quite a lot of the things that some people are perhaps afraid to look at. So there are many, many reasons why I would choose a death goddess. I'm also just more fascinated by the imagery surrounding them. I relate more to the way they look, and I relate more to the way their energy comes across when we look at man-made depictions of them, when we look at what they kind of appear as when they are filtered through the human consciousness and come out in kind of like paintings and stories and things of that nature. So there were many reasons why I chose a death goddess, but I really wanted to get deeper with that exploration. I wanted to understand the deeper reasons why it was so important to me to have a death deity, and why a female death deity. So I really journaled about that, and it was really interesting. It went to some really interesting places. And I would also recommend that if you're going to start actively searching for a deity in accordance with a theme or concept that you've chosen, try doing a third eye activation meditation first of all, and you can find lots of quite useful ones and good ones on YouTube. So I would kind of recommend doing that. You know, really bring your focus to the forehead, really bring your focus to this part of the auric field, and then maybe bring it up into the crown chakra. If you're totally new to chakra work, you can still do this. You can find lots of great guided meditations and lots of information out there to help you. And I'm sure one day I will get around to doing a video series on the chakras. I know, I'm sorry, there's so much to talk about and not as much time as I would like to talk about it all, but I really found it was useful to open up my third eye. That's something that I would say, just so I could get those little nuances of connection and kind of speak to my higher self and allow my higher self to take over and get into the driver's seat and say, there's something here. But it doesn't need to feel grand. It doesn't need to feel incredibly special. It's like a little tweak. It feels like a little tweak, kind of like someone pulling my arm slightly. I kind of felt when I came across Hell. It was like I was flipping through a book, and all of a sudden I kind of saw something between the pages of the book, and then I was like, hang on a minute, and then I kind of flipped back and saw her. That was how it felt. It was like a small moment of there's something more with this one. This one I want to explore. This one I want to get into. So, you know, don't expect sort of stars and magic, and don't expect kind of the goddess to appear in front of you. But I'm telling you, if you find a goddess or god that you get that little click with at first, that little sense of sacred curiosity, that's what we'll call it, sacred curiosity. If you come across a deity like that, I guarantee you that if you nurture that and you foster that and you go with that, the magic stuff will come. The magical stuff will come. It's been that way for me. So I wanted to reassure you of that too. There's no need to immediately dedicate. This is something that I want to say. You can just open up to signs and symbols. Just kind of ask for messages, set your intention, just state that you're open. Just kind of drop them a text, drop them a cosmic text. Just say, hey, I'm interested, I'm open, I'm willing, I'm ready to receive. Show me what you got. You know, I'm opening myself to you, and I'd like to get to know you a little bit more. You know, it's like a first date, or like someone you know you want to be friends with, and you have to kind of give them that nudge and say, hey, you know, come out with me, let's have a chat, let's go for a drink, whatever. Especially if you're working with Dionysus, you could go for 10 drinks, but that's a different story. So yeah, you know, it's about really just opening yourself, just being open, just being ready to receive. And you'll notice that some of the little nuances in your life and some of the situations that are going on will kind of connect themselves subtly with the primal energy of that god or goddess that you want to work with. And you'll start kind of associating as you read more about their stories, which is very important. If there are many stories surrounding them, make sure you're reading them. And if there aren't, you know, make sure that you're doing meditations and visualizations, just kind of trying to make that bond with them. I would really recommend that if you're doing that sort of stuff kind of diligently and fairly regularly, you will be able to get into some kind of groove. You don't need to dedicate straight away. I really believe that instant dedication to a god or goddess that you've known about for a week or two doesn't necessarily mean instant results in terms of communion and in terms of understanding. Ritual does change something in the inner world. Doing something in the outer world to represent desired change in the inner world is super effective. And it does work, but I would urge you not to throw yourself in, because sometimes you come across a deity that you feel is going to be really, really meaningful and really significant. And they may well be, but only for that little space in time. And you'll realise that it was never really meant that you were supposed to dedicate and have them as a matron or patron. Actually, they were kind of passing through, or actually they had something to teach you in a series of ongoing but quite fractured lessons. And they're not necessarily the deity that you're supposed to be working with all the time or regularly or on Sabbats, or kind of bringing information about them more and more into your life. So I would urge you not to dedicate too quickly on that basis as well, because it can feel a little bit awkward and icky when you kind of choose a matron or patron very spontaneously, and then you kind of have to step back and be like, oh no, that's not going to fly. That's not exactly kind of the connection that I thought it was, or I feel like it's kind of gone stale, or I feel like there's not that sense of communion there. So dedication should really be for a latter stage in the game, I feel, after you've really kind of connected with the primal energy and kind of gone deeper, and just really see how you feel and sit with it for a few months. That's what I did with Hell. I sat with it for about 8 or 9 months before I dedicated, almost a year. So almost a year of learning about her and learning about her kingdom, and you know, understanding who her father is. It's Loki, so that was a lot of study just by itself. He's a nightmare. But yeah, so, you know, learning about her 2 brothers and their associations and so on, and I'm really just thinking about how it all fit together, and how she kind of mirrored some parts of my life that, you know, that I kind of saw in her, and I measured it up to my own. And so, yeah, it was kind of fascinating, and I'm really glad that I dedicated so late in the game, and that I really just gave the time to absorbing the stories and recognising how they mirrored something about me, and kind of just going deeper with the meditations, and kind of just really feeling her energy and letting it surround me. So I would say don't be tempted to dedicate too swiftly. You can ask them to appear in dreams. This is something that I would say, but they may not appear as themselves. So if you start communing with a deity, you start sort of letting a god or goddess know that you are open to them, and you are kind of willing to invite their energies into your life. And it has to be that subtle, just that subtle. Just be open, just be willing, just be kind of thinking about them on a more and more kind of regular basis, and opening up your life to the potential for working with their energy. You can make an offering to them in that way too. You can make an offering, and that can be your kind of way of saying, I'm open, I'm ready, I'm inviting your energies and your lessons into my life, like and I'm waiting for you to show up, you know, respectfully, yours faithfully, pagan with an altar offering, and that's fine. But you can also ask a god or goddess to appear in dreams, but I just want to let you know they may not always appear as themselves, but normally it will be what we would call a big dream, so there'll be lots of archetypal stuff in there and lots of symbols and things like that. Kind of, you'll be in a strange land, it will be a land that you're not really familiar with, and everything when you wake up will seem really kind of symbolic and strange, and that might be their way of kind of letting you know what's going on and what the condition of the relationship could be and how much further it could go. So that's one way of doing it. And lastly, I wanted to talk about, I don't know how many of you guys read the Circle of Friends newsletter that's run by Lunar Wisdom. If you don't read it, you should. I write the Chaos Magic article for the newsletter every month. I'm going to leave you a link below to the Circle of Friends newsletter, and if you go to the right hand side and click on the Chaos Magic segment, at the moment my latest article that I wrote will be there, and it is about communicating with personified deity, so you might want to check that out. And at the beginning of that article I talk about an idea that I read about recently that was posited by Aleister Crowley. Posited by Aleister Crowley. Now, I know that Aleister Crowley was a little bit of a magpie and a little bit of a toucher and taster and buffet kind of eater of many different things, so it may not have been him that first came up with this idea, and I fully accept that, but without knowing like the ins and outs of the entire Hermetic tradition, which is where I understand he grabbed a lot of his stuff from, I won't know whether or not it's originally his idea. So if it wasn't originally his concept, please let me know below. If you are a hardcore occultic genius and you want to put me in my place, I love to be put in my place, so please let me know below if this wasn't his original idea. But I came across an idea that Aleister Crowley said was his own anyway, and it was in a book of his. And it basically outlined 7 ways to bond with your deity, or invoke a certain being, or kind of like have a communion with a certain being. And I really took this to heart in my own practice. I read it, it instantly resonated with me, and I decided to use it in my bonding with my matron deity, and I have been doing that over the past several months. And I just want to put this out to you before I end this video, because I think it's such a powerful exercise. I've written the 7 points down because even though I've got them in my head, I know I'm going to forget them now that I'm on camera, because that's just how it goes. So he said that there are 7 key ways that you can go through to bond with your, for the case of this video, your deity that you're looking to get in touch with. I would say that this is more kind of something to do after you've selected a matron or patron, or you kind of know that the work is going to be ongoing with them and you already have that sense of communion with them. And at that point, I really think you should go through this exercise because it's just killer. I mean, it's really, really exciting stuff. So the first way is as a slave to his master. So actually communing with your deity as though you are a slave and it is the master, kind of, you know, asking it what it wants, and kind of really making, like, prostrating yourself in front of it, making yourself available to it, her, him, for its bidding, and kind of almost letting it know that you're not worthy. That's kind of how it is. The next way to address is as a vassal to a lord, so kind of as your boss in a sense, kind of thing, your landlord, your kind of overlord. The third way is as a child to a parent. So this actually brings up a lot of stuff about one's own childhood and one's own upbringing and conditioning, which was really, really interesting for me when I did this with my matron. So I addressed hell as my mother. The fourth way is as a priest to their deity, which was so awesome because I got to have that more sense of personal relationship, almost kind of like a privilege, like an entitled relationship, which kind of comes from being one above the flock and kind of having that priestly vibe kind of thing. And the fifth one is as one sibling to another. This again brought up a lot of feelings about my own upbringing and my relationship with my sister especially, but also with my brother, and just thinking about the ways in which we would talk and the memories that we've shared that nobody else kind of knows about, and kind of addressing my matron in that way was really exciting. The sixth way is as close friends. So addressing your matron or patron as close friends would address each other. And the seventh and final way is as lovers. So that's kind of a really intimate, really kind of immediate feeling of communication, and it has a lot to do with how the Sufis would address God in their poetry, which I also kind of thought of as an association. So yeah, these 7 ways of communicating with your matron or patron, I mean, you can use it for deities that you are kind of experiencing and having some kind of relationship with, but I personally use these 7 to form a closer bond to my matron, and to kind of understand all the different ways in which I could communicate and the different nuances and levels of our relationship. And it was hugely illuminating for me. And I think after Samhain, at some point, I'm going to be doing the same process for a few months with my patron deity, who I only just kind of identified about a year ago. So yeah, I'm going to be doing that, and I just wanted to share that with you because I think it's really such an exciting exercise, and I did write about that in the article. So if you don't read Circle of Friends, check it out every month. I write about chaos magic. I know a lot of you guys are into that stuff, and I will do more of that kind of content at another point. But for today, I hope that this video was useful and interesting. Much love, blessed be.